Next, we want to welcome Dainius Puras. He is a professor of child psychiatry and public mental health at Vilnius University in Lithuania. In 2014, he was appointed by the UN Human Rights Council and serves since then as a UN Special Reporter on the right to health. He was the president of Lithuanian Psychiatric Association, Dean of the Medical Faculty of Vilnius University, and Chair of the Board of Human Rights Monitoring Institute, to name a few. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to Iceland and to this conference. I am happy to share my views and insights on this very important issue. I will start from reminding us that there is a very special momentum globally for mental health. Finally, it's out of shadows. Also, I will tell some things about my mandate, and then I will elaborate on some messages from my report, which was mentioned here. Maybe firstly about my mandate. Yes, it's fourth year now when I am serving as a special rapporteur on the right to physical and mental health. It belongs to UN system, but it's very interesting design. It is both UN and not UN, because differently from all other UN systems, which people have job contracts and they work for UN, special rapporteurs are just appointed, and they work in their individual capacity as independent expert. I think it's very inspiring design, maybe a little bit cruel when you have to do a lot without any salary. Salary is at home. I mean, I work in Lithuania. My salary is, I'm professor of child psychiatry in Lithuania, and I allocate as much time as I can to these activities, mainly travels, which are covered. These official travels are covered by UN, but also not official, by invitations of organizations like you now invited me. But main mandated activities are thematic reports, like this on mental health. I analyze the situation and I report to UN, mainly to states, governments, but also to other stakeholders about challenges, opportunities, the ways forward on different issues. This was my seventh report. Before was on early childhood, on adolescent, on different aspects of physical health. And the last was on corruption and right to health. And I report either to Human Rights Council in Geneva or to General Assembly in New York. My next report will be on right to health of people who are detained in any places, prisons, different places of deprivation of liberty. And my next then report will be on people on the move, right to health of those who are asylum seekers, refugees, migrants, and so on. This is my fourth year, which means I have two more, and then UN will appoint next special rapporteur. So it's a good way UN decided to have these special rapporteurs who are independent experts, and they just inform, and then all important stakeholders may reflect on this. Why mental health is so important? Probably not in this audience to convince you, but just it happened so that finally it could be done many years before. Globally, mental health is recognized as priority. Mental health is finally in so-called SDGs, it's Sustainable Development Goals. In MDGs, there was no mental health. It was only about survival mainly Now it's about also development and emotional well-being. So mental health is in SDGs. And what is good news that in 2016 and in 2017, UN Human Rights Council passed very, very powerful resolutions on mental health and human rights. So it's not just about my report. My report just resonates with all these developments. There are many other promising signs. But then so this is consensus about this. This is a little bit boring if we just stay and discuss how important is mental health. Everybody agrees now. But then now, so what to do next? How to invest, or I should say, in provocative way, how not to invest. So this is the question. And this is about, shall we invest more in systems which are just what is called status quo? Or shall we change the systems, which is always a good idea, but not everybody likes it. So yes, the question is whether we need a shift of paradigm, which already was happening in the history of psychiatry. And I think always it was for the good. But now we again seem to be at the crossroad, and I was analyzing this situation also before I knew that I will become special rapporteur, but mainly I was working, I knew very well the situation in my region, which is more Central Eastern Europe. And now I can travel, and I have been in almost all regions already, except Australia, Oceania. I still have to go there. So first of all, it's about promoting mental health of everyone. Then we will go to people with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities. But in my mandate, for example, is about right to health and including mental health of everyone. So what I stressed also in this report, that especially to governments, that all forms of inequalities and violence have negative impact on mental health, and that states need to invest in enabling non-discriminatory, non-violent environments in all settings: family, school, workplace, community, healthcare services, society at large, and I should add mental health services also should be non-violent. So, and I remind when I go, especially, I forgot to mention, I go to so-called official country missions. Now I'm in Iceland, but this is not official. But for example, governments invite, and I go to country for like 2 weeks, and then I report on the situation of right to health. So in many countries I see, especially in current international global climate, some regression with human rights in general. And this, of course, may negatively impact mental health. So in general, promoting human rights is very curative, so to say, is a good vaccine for mental health, whether it's about economic social rights or civil political rights. It's always should be reminded. And of course, crucial role of civil society. Iceland, as also most countries in Europe, they enjoy democracy. Sometimes we forget that we have it. It's very good to have democracy. And I travel sometimes to countries which unfortunately have very narrow space, if any, for civil society. So, and this can be very detrimental also for right to health. So now, when we come to these issues which are not, which create some tensions and where views may be different, is, let us say, about biomedical model versus human rights framework. Both sides, when there are discussions, have good intentions. I know psychiatry very well. I am a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are full of good intentions. It's not about people being good or bad. It's just about different views. And this classical biomedical paradigm is about patients who have diagnoses and professionals who are experts, and they are doing their best to fix disorder. So what is wrong in that? Somebody will tell if we follow this biomedical model. Now, human rights framework, which is especially getting stronger after CRPD was endorsed by globally. It's now 12 years already, in the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was approved. This powerful convention questions the biomedical model and even urges to move from medical model to a social model and human rights based approach, and also reminds of crucial principles applied in medicine, which are informed consent and first do no harm. So there are many convincing, there have been during the last 50 or 60 years, there have been many critical statements by different organizations about what is happening in mental health care. This is not a new thing, especially concerning non-consensual measures and overuse of biomedical model. As a doctor, medical doctor by background, I am not against biomedical model. I just have a lot of evidence that it tends to be overused and misused. So this decision-making process is made in psychiatry, differently from general healthcare, is dominated by monopoly, or I should say maybe too strong monopoly, almost monopoly, exercised by medical profession, by medical doctors. And this allows to very easily override principle of informed consent and such exceptions, which let's say we decide, okay, sometimes it should be exception. But as we know, and especially in countries which do not enjoy, let's say, democracy, I would add from myself, these exceptions in practice turn into the rule. And they pave the way to human rights violations in very massive ways. So when I travel, I see thousands of people locked in strange institutions because one day they receive a diagnosis of mental condition, and then somebody was deciding that no, with good intentions again, that it will be too difficult for this person to stay in, let's say, open society. Maybe it's better to live in some institution. And surprisingly often, in some countries, a secular argument is used, according to which a person reluctant to undergo psychiatric hospitalization and treatment may be qualified as being not able to appreciate his or her own condition and the risk of potential worsening, which then is qualified as another reason for applying non-consensual measures. So if we compare with what happened in the rest of medicine, if somebody is ill with cancer and doctor will offer chemotherapy, the patient may tell, thank you, I don't want, goodbye. So I don't question if it's good or bad decision by patient, but you know. Now, this never happened in psychiatry. And I will even complicate issue, and I tell a person with mental health condition, if this person is ill with cancer and will be offered chemotherapy, and he or she will tell, thank you, I don't want, maybe somebody will tell, oh, you see, he's absolutely crazy. Should receive chemotherapy by force. So this is what things I think have gone wrong. Now many lessons from history, I will not spend much time on this, but history of psychiatry, as we know, is very dramatic, was always these pendulums shifting from so-called brainless mind to mindless brain and then back and so on. And we know these stories with lobotomy, which received, the author, as you know, received Nobel Prize. And then after some time, it was condemned as brutal violation of human rights. World Health Report, 17 years ago, very, very good World Health Report, very promising, was never implemented. These recommendations to liberate mental health from let's say, from psychiatric hospitals as sources of stigma, because everything should be integrated in general health care. And CRPD, which now is 12 years, governments refuse to follow main recommendations of CRPD committee, especially in the field of mental health care. So this all together led to main messages and spirit of my report, because my idea was to contribute to this momentum and to try to look for champions, those who will agree to move ahead. Also because as we see the history of psychiatry, again, these relations between psychiatry and human rights was always very complicated. It was like some difficult marriage, and it was always discussions if this marriage stays or they go for some divorce. I was feeling this when I was working for many years as mental health professional, because I was interested in this darker side of psychiatry. And then my colleagues started to ask me one day, what happened with you? You are not a doctor anymore because you are interested in human rights. And then I still struggle with what I should answer, because you have to explain what is wrong with you. But I do not want to be cynical. I mean, these are good doctors who ask this, because the message they received in medical education that the more aggressive the doctor, the better he or she is. So, and if you start to raise the questions about human rights, you create sort of obstacles for doctors to fix disorders. And this can be seen as some artificial obstacle. So this is why this tension between human rights and mental health is still is can be felt in all levels, clinical level, but also policy making level and international debates. So this is why the messages from my report mainly are, let's say, provocative, also with good intentions. And for the first of them is, instead of global burden of diseases, which is classical message from WHO, to speak about global burden of diseases, that mental health creates a very large burden of diseases. I question this concept as leading to even more medicalization and stigmatization. And instead, I raised the concept of global burden of obstacles in parallel with CRPD, because as you know, CRPD tells that obstacles are not in head or legs of person with disability. It's in environment, in obstacles which we create as society. So what are these obstacles in progressive realization of the right to mental health? And I raised such obstacles as dominance of biomedical model and overuse of biomedical interventions. Then huge power asymmetries, like again in rest of medicine there is more partnerships that doctor gives some options and it's patient choice, not in psychiatry. And then biased use of knowledge and evidence. Yes, if we read guidelines, if we read official textbooks, and medical students are learning about that, first medications, and then if it's some luxury, if you are a rich country, you can also provide some talking therapies. I mean, in my region, talking therapies have been never funded by health insurance or budget, because it is seen as a luxury. These are just extra. I will not read everything, just for myself to remind what I have written in the report. It's funny language. I have still some allergy to UN language, but you know, you can find this funny expression in the report. The special rapporteur urges. And not only me, several of us are protesting, you know. I want to use normal language. But explanation is very interesting. It's not about me. It's not Puras is telling this thing, it's mandate holder. This is why we are very strongly advised to write a special rapporteur urges governments, because the next, after me will be next special rapporteur. It's nothing to do with my personality, with my name. I think it's a good idea, even if sounds in some in strange way. So, first message is that this is failure of the status quo and it is unacceptable. I mean, if we again promote evolution, this will lead to decoration of system which is not working, and investing in more and more. Like in Eastern Europe, in EU member states, a lot of European Union funds were used to make large psychiatric institutions more nice, like to paint walls, instead of abandoning these institutions. So one of examples that this is not about a lack of money, it's something wrong with the attitudes in mental health system. So if it is unacceptable, then we have to make a tough decision about how to invest and how not to invest. And this is why this report calls for leadership to confront global burden of obstacles and to embed rights-based mental health innovation. And this call is mainly to state champions, to governments, and also professional groups, especially psychiatry, which is very influential professional group, also managers of mental health services, and to remind all these powerful stakeholders that they need to work in partnership with their constituents, which includes persons with disabilities, intellectual, cognitive, psychosocial. Also about working on this balance between investments in biomedical and other interventions, and to prioritize effective psychosocial interventions in the community, to scale up them, and to abandon in this way. My recommendation is to abandon in gradually. I will comment on this because this was sort of compromise which was not accepted by many users and survivors. So usually special rapporteur takes position which does not please anybody. So this is the life of independent experts. And to abandon this culture and tradition of coercion, isolation, excessive medicalization. So one way is to urge for, like CRPD committee made in general comment, they urged states to ban all non-consensual measures, like when? Now. And I agree, but I see that this is not happening. So then I give chance to governments, if you do not want to go legal way and to ban all non-consensual measures, because you close your eyes and you cannot imagine how psychiatry can exist without coercion. So then please move with policy approach by prioritizing those so-called alternatives, that mainstream them, that they are the main, become the main, and then slowly, or not slowly, but gradually, the coercive psychiatry can be abandoned. So this is my compromise, and not all users and survivors were happy with this compromise, because I sort of condone and tolerate violence which is happening in psychiatry. Another key message is that users should be involved in design, implementation, delivery, and evaluation of mental health services, systems, and policies. And this is not about some tokenistic approach, but about real and genuine involvement. Stop directing investments to institutional care. This is maybe not happening in your country, but there are many countries where still new institutions are being built. Invest in psychosocial services that are integrated into primary care and community, and empower users the strange thing which happened during these 30 years, I think, and want to share with you that this biomedical approach, biological psychiatry, promised to eliminate or reduce significantly stigma. And this did not happen because the idea was that if we equate mental illnesses with somatic illnesses, then stigma will disappear. But some different outcome was from this medicalizations, that users were not empowered. They were told, this is your disease, you know, and we are medical people, we know how to fix it by voluntary, or if you not agree, then involuntary. So to develop a basic package of culturally sensitive psychosocial interventions, a big debate maybe about also depression, anxiety, what to recommend to other regions. It's, I mean, is Western type model applicable in other regions, Africa, Asia, and this is big debate. I do not want to start it now, but so my recommendation, this sort of compromise, was that take targeted concrete measures to radically reduce medical coercion and facilitate the move towards end to all forced psychiatric treatment and confinement. So here is this so-called compromise. How to do this? There are many creative ways. I will not read all them. You can see all these recommendations, how states could move towards elimination of non-consensual measures. I want to share my impressions from what happened after report, because I received many responses, very broad range of, as you can imagine, very positive, critical, and very critical, and very critical. And now I am thinking what to do with it, you know, because one goal was achieved. I mean, to have any responses. It's good to know that somebody is reading a report. But what to do this, because first impression was that this report polarized, you know, and you should look for some compromise. But this polarization always existed. So it's not that this report created polarization. So now when I am starting I have many dialogues with, especially with those who disagree, I see some reluctance from, especially from elite of psychiatry, even not to try to go this way. This is a little bit disappointing, because there is no interest in so-called alternatives, or maybe little interest, but we understand that this is about power game, and I hope that my colleagues psychiatrists also could understand that to have too much power can be not healthy even to those who have this power. But I don't know if it is a good argument. In my report, I call for a shift of paradigm. I remind the human rights imperative in general, all human rights, especially address adversities in childhood and adolescence. We know now from evidence, and also thanks to British Psychological Society, but also many other research done about how much early childhood adversities can influence mental health. So this is a lot can be done on prevention here. Then about preventing medicalization of human diversity and misery. So I was reading about Iceland before coming, and yes, this is a very interesting paradox you have. Maybe we idealize Iceland. For us is now like paradise, also in football, but not only, but how it comes that country who is among happiest in the world is using most antidepressants in the world. So some of my colleagues, psychiatrists, will tell they are happy because they use antidepressants. So, you know, you can manipulate with this as you wish. So maybe if every citizen in the world is on antidepressants, then we reach total happiness. But this is my sarcastic conclusion. But this is interesting combination, isn't it? To be a happy nation and to use a lot of antidepressants. It will be interesting to do some, I don't know, research on this. Then my recommendations: mainstream mental health and discontinue investment in segregated psychiatric institutions. Maybe it's more relevant to other regions and countries, because still international, it's about international support, because international support goes still to build separate psychiatric institutions in developing countries. Then prioritize culturally appropriate psychosocial interventions, replicate good practices that provide non-coercive mental health services, and address imbalances and biased knowledge in medical education and other education. In my next report, which was to last autumn to General Assembly, I raised this issue that in psychiatry there is a lot of corruption of knowledge due to influence of big pharma, and how it happened that this knowledge was sent to all stakeholders about that first biomedical interventions and not other interventions. Now, issues for serious debate, which I think it can be very painful, very sensitive, but still I think it is needed. You know, it's about hierarchy of rights. There is no hierarchy of rights. In universal human rights principles, there is no hierarchy of rights. Now, what happened with psychiatry, the leaders of psychiatry, they tell first, patient has a right to have a good psychiatrist, and so that his or her disorder may be fixed in professional way. And then and after that he or she can exercise all other rights. But first, this right to receive treatment, voluntary or by force. So this is how hierarchy of rights is created. But we have to admit that other side, let's say human rights activists, they tell no. First, person has a right to live in dignity and to be free from all kind of coercion, and then it's also maybe hierarchy of rights can be destroyed. So the problem is that in theory these rights are equally important, but what to do in practice? And then we turn about this to these special cases when somebody can tell, okay, what will you do in this very dramatic case? And we have to look for answers, for creative answers to all these questions. And I raised this in report with confidence about two conventional wisdoms, which are based more on myths than on science, and they create the power of psychiatry, unfortunately. This is so-called dangerousness concept. Just, he or she may be dangerous, this is why we lock. How do you know that he or she may be dangerous so that, threatening to life of the... Well, the only answer I had is that I know because I'm a doctor. That there is no other answer, no evidence-based answer, and I think it's quite a weak argument. So this is about dangerous, and this concept is misused, let's say. And another concept is concept of medical necessity, because again, the medical professional will tell, if we do not place involved in this person by force and provide treatment, condition may deteriorate. But it may deteriorate because of these involuntary measures. So this is again very painful question, but I raise in the report that these two concepts lack scientific evidence, and they contribute to stigma of people who use mental health services, but stigma of psychiatry also, because this is the only field of medicine which is enjoying these myths, and this is why it's so powerful. It should not be so. Then it is all this, as you know, very complicated debate about supported versus substitute decision-making, legal capacity, and so on, no consensus here. And in general, this impasse situation, I did not know this word in English, not my first language, but this impasse, I learned this word, situation when both sides cannot agree. It's impossible to agree. So what to do then? We have to look for some creative examples from human history, how impasse situation was somehow solved. And I would like to recommend also this WHO Quality Rights Initiative. Is very good. It's the best what was done by, so now during last years, the mental health by WHO, because it's a very good tool for those who are not convinced that we should and can move forwards towards the rights-based mental health services. This is a practical tool, some learning exercise model, what to do in this complicated situation, how non-violent, non-coercive measures could be applied if we all agree that just to try this. And the last is about, I am preparing, I don't know how many here in this room are from professional group of psychiatry. I am planning and having meetings. I will meet the leaders of German Psychiatric Association. They take this very seriously. At least we agreed that they agreed to move to radical reduction of non-coercive measures. So this is the compromise. You know, they are not ready for full elimination because they don't know how to reach it. Okay, so let's move to radical reduction, and then we shall see. You know, so we will have a meeting, and also we have discussion with the World Psychiatric Association, with current president Helen Herman from Australia, how world psychiatric community could contribute to better realization of mental health through non-coercive measures. So, and I'm happy, and I think that Iceland could be one of these countries who could be a model for among champions, who could be a model for other countries to move to this shift of paradigm. So now I stop and thank you very much.